Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching The Salty Sea, and I'm back with another cube review. This is different than my usual content. We're going to do a big round table of all of my Magic buddies talking about the latest set. This is a little bit late, as we are wont to do. We're giving the set a little bit of time to marinate, and so as a result, we'll have the option to use a little bit of data to see how these cards have actually shaken out. We've got a slightly different crew than last month today. We'll be rotating in and out, a bit of a revolving door, but returning is Ashton.
Howdy, folks.
And then we've also got Dan. I don't think Dan was here last month. How you doing, Dan?
I wasn't. Dan number 2, checking in.
And then finally, we got Ronald. How you doing, Ronald?
I'm good. Glad to be back.
Awesome to hear. All right, so I think we have to start with the elephant in the room, or the cascading elephant in the room, which is Cascade. For these, I'm always going to start with sort of Power Maxed Legacy and occasionally Vintage Cubes as well. But the one that I'm most interested in talking about for those is Cascade as a mechanic. It's not currently in a lot of super powered cubes, but it seems broken enough that you could enable it and you could do really broken things with it. Let's start in generalities. Like, Dan, do you think Cascade would be constructed only? Like, do you think it's possible to do broken Cascade stuff in Limited?
Well, you have the failsafe of just discover whatever and putting it in your hand. So I was thinking with Discover 5 specifically, higher powered cubes. Force of Will is probably the best reactive 5 you could hit. Or I guess in that case, it would be the worst reactive 5 you could hit. And then worst case scenario, you just put it in your hand. So I think you can mess around with it. And I don't think you would really find a way to break it. Just a value engine is how I would see it.
Ronald, what do you think of this idea of, like, a lot of vintage cubes still have Storm in there, for example? Like, what if you took out the Storm cards in your vintage cube and tried to have like lots of split cards and all of the relevant Cascade cards? Like, do you think that trying to build something like that in a powered cube environment could get you very far?
I mean, if we're talking about a powered cube, we're talking about as Moxin and things like that. Because if you cast your Logical Appraiser on a Cascade and hit your Mox, that's not really a combo.
True.
That's the number you're trying to have. Only you want your only hits to be your combo pieces, like the Rhinos. So it'd be hard to do that in a cube.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering about, like, you first pick Time Walk and then you grab Ancestral Visions along the way, and like you just have a bunch of Cascade stuff. Like, do you think that would be good enough in a powered cube? I don't know. As I'm saying it, I'm talking myself out of it. Ashton, what do you think?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, so I agree with Ronald that there are definitely some deck building restrictions that come with playing these cards. On the other hand, the ability to just put the card into your hand is really good. And I feel like even in a powered vintage cube, or like a legacy cube where maybe you don't have access to the Power 9, but you do have access to other powerful cards, it does say basically either play an awesome card for free or draw a card. And I don't know, it's hard to see a downside to that for me, even if the draw card may not necessarily be what you want.
And I wonder, like, Bloodbraid Elf isn't in most really high-powered cubes anymore, but I was looking at Trumpeting Carnosaur, and the two cards that see play in really high-powered cubes are Inferno Titan and Oliphant. And these are I'm just talking about red 6-drops. And it does feel, maybe this is blasphemous to say, I don't know, you guys can check me on this. I feel like Trumpeting Carnosaur, probably not better than Oliphant just because Mountain Cycling 1 is so broken, but I kind of think it's better than Inferno Titan. I don't know. Is that crazy?
I mean, there's certainly ways to make it better. So the key to Trumpeting Carnosaur is that when it enters the battlefield, it's Discover 5, where like Geological Appraiser specifically says enters the battlefield if you cast it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely abusable in a reanimator type thing, which I would certainly expect to see in at the very least, like a legacy power cube.
Sure, that makes sense.
Sneak attack.
Yeah. Right, because like Inferno Titan, if it sticks around for 2 turns, Inferno Titan's better for sure. I'm not arguing with that, but it just seems like the the ETB trigger on Carnosaur just seems so much better than Inferno Titan that it feels like I'd rather play that and then discarding it to just be a bad removal spell. I mean, like you said, Dan, in Reanimator situations, like why not? Like that's such a reasonable failsafe to have for that. I don't know, Ashton, what do you think of? Is Carnosaur good enough to topple what's essentially been like a massive nostalgia piece for a very long time in the Titan?
I don't know. That's tough to say, especially because the Carnosaur does have the discard, which, like we mentioned, Reanimator already. So that's a natural combo there. Like it does kind of a similar thing that Titan does, and also has this other ability tacked on that is potentially just automatically game winning. So
Yeah.
I can see it replacing Inferno Titan. I'm not necessarily sure that it should do that, but if someone wants to do that in their cube, I can justify that.
Sure, fair
I
enough.
think it comes down to if the cube designer, if you want to be, say, really hostile toward small aggro decks, then I think you would keep Inferno Titan in, and obviously ways to, cheat it in.
Right.
Whereas Trumpeting Carnosaur is a 0-for-1, followed by a 2-for-1 if you reanimate it.
And I wonder, I mean, that's a good point. Like, because when you're sneak attacking and you're under pressure, Inferno Titan, you're not under pressure anymore. Whereas Trumpeting Carnosaur, you need a little bit of help there. That's a good point. There's still a reasonable number of other cards that I think can be included in maybe not necessarily powered cube all the time, but really power maxed legacy cubes. And so I wanted to look at the top cards overall. Now, I like using data here, but it can be a little bit tough. Right now, Standard is essentially a collection of Esper cards. These are I guess I meant to do 20, but I hit the 19 top cards overall in Standard on MTG Goldfish. There are 3 Ixalan cards in there right now. They're all, of course, the Esper cards, but I suppose it's worth talking about them. Dan, you've played with Schooner a little bit, right?
I have literally never cast Schooner.
Oh, no, I was wrong about that.
But I was all too happy to theory craft about how good this is, and thank you for the note, worst smuggler's copter. But is it that much worse?
Yeah, I wrote this slide a little while ago, and now I'm not convinced that it's worse. I'm not convinced that, like, is looting versus having something explore, which would you rather do? I kind of would rather explore, actually. Now, flying on the copter is obviously amazing, and being 2 colorless is obviously amazing, but I do think I'd rather explore, and that 4th point in toughness is so relevant, especially in Cube, where like we've got a lot of Bolt clones running around. It just seems like an incredible card that could go in almost any cube. I don't know. Ashton, have you thought much about this card?
So I've seen the Schooner played a fair amount,
Uh-huh.
and one of the things that sticks out to me is that blue mana, and especially like depending on how good the fixing is in your cube, that can sometimes even be a boon and make the card easier to play because you're going to be fetching for blue so often anyways. That like in some ways this may actually be a better Smuggler's Copter. Honestly,
Sure.
I think at the very least it's a side grade.
With Get Lost, one of the things that happened a lot in spoiler season was folks comparing this one to the exact same card that gives you a clue instead of 2 maps. And, it was easy to get drawn into an argument of whether 2 maps are better than a clue. And we can have that argument if you guys want to, but how many times have you had a creature removal spell in your hand in cube and just been like, man, if this could kill enchantments, Like I would do anything for that right now. It seems like a lot, right?
Yeah, I think just this one being so versatile, not just creatures or planeswalkers, but enchantments as well. It's a really good card to have access to.
I think it's kind of snowbally because map tokens target at sorcery speed. So you can be prepared to minimize the impact of those map tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. I think the 2 map tokens is way better for you as the caster of this spell than giving your opponent a clue. Like, it is way easier to make those maps useless.
sure. I think you have to be on like pure control to manage it. But yeah, them hitting at sorcery speed certainly does that. I do love having these types of removal spells in white where it's not where the downside, like Oblivion Ring, that downside is so terrible if they destroy Oblivion Ring, but is nothing if they don't. And these other ones, like I love Path to Exile for this reason. They're powerful cards, but they encourage like more cool stuff happens in the game when you have these cards like in your environment. You know what I mean? Um like if you get the value, if your opponent gets the value off the maps, maybe they're ahead, but then you made an interesting tempo play. Like it's there's just so much more interaction that happens. I don't know. I like the concept of this.
There's definitely been playing a deck with this in standard, and there's definitely times where I miss my hand. I'm like, is this the right time to do this, or are they going to get too much value from the map tokens? If it is now, should I wait? Or it definitely does. You get more interesting play dynamic, like you said, and I think the same would happen with Cube.
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff there. Dan, you were saying that Deep Cavern Bat is the best mesmeric fiend. Are you still feeling that way?
It certainly can be.
Loading it up with equipment, right, is sort of the dream, or other kinds of things that are pumping your team, anthem effects, something like that. Like, is that what you're thinking?
Well, I don't like to give my opponents any additional incentive to kill my fiend or
Sure.
brainworm effects.
Would you would you want in a cube? Would you want to have multiples of these? Because I kind of like freebooter the best, um, but like, how many would you want in a cube? Like Ashton, would you? Because I know I know that you are a lover of sort of some of these black value decks sometimes. Like, would you want like 3 of these in your black value deck in a cube ever?
Honestly, probably not. Like, I would much rather have like your ex Fenlurker, where you're just making them exile the card,
Hmm.
um, or a freebooter where you actually get to use it potentially later. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of the mesmeric fiend effects, even in black decks, especially as creatures have gotten better over the years. Because they get outclassed so easily, and like Dan said, you don't want to suit them up and make them targets for removal.
Sure. So were you talking about Valky for as like the one that you get to use later?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, that one's probably the best one in any cube that doesn't have bowmasters. Um, but I mean, even if you do have bowmasters, it's only one card, right, that totally blows you out. Um, yeah, okay. So I've got a few others that I think can go well in high-powered cubes. Malcolm, I think, is really incredible. There's a ton of good 2 mana looters. Like, just Looteril Core has just so many friends that do the exact same. I guess Ronald, kind of the same question I asked Ashton about these freebooters. Like, would you want multiple sort of Looteril Core, Malcolm, blanking on like the names of all the others, but we've got like 5 or 6 of them now. Would you want multiples in your deck ever?
Is the werewolf one as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think if I was playing a deck that wanted this, I would be happy to have more, especially like Malcolm, because slash and flying. So
Mhm.
it's much easier, especially to get that first attack and to get the initial value.
Yeah, it does seem extra, like compared to the others, it seems extra nice in Reanimator where that fourth thing that you do. I mean, you're never going to actually get it, but if you ever did, that fourth thing that you do, like might actually be something really, really big. How valuable is the flash here?
That's the dream.
Yeah, that is the dream. Does the flash here put it over the edge over any of the other ones, or like what do you think there? I mean, it's sort of blue haste, but what do you think?
It can also be a surprise blocker in the air,
Oh, sure.
which isn't nothing either.
Yeah, like if you're on defense. I never want to be. I almost never evaluate cards like I'm on defense because I never want to be, but I am on defense half the time, I find. So that is worth
So
thinking
they
about.
played the bat and exiled your best card out of your hand, and now they're attacking with a 1/1 left-looking bat. You want to trade off you want to get that better card back.
Yeah, I mean that's a great deal if I can get that one. All right, Ashton, any thoughts on Malcolm, or do you see him as kind of just straightforward? What do you think?
I mean, I just really like Malcolm as a card. I like a lot of the cards in this set so far. But I just he does feel like a much more enjoyable, like just fun to play with effect. Partly because of a lot of it because of that flash. Because like Ronald said, you can block with him. It allows him to usually get a free hit in. Just like all of those things, just the flexibility makes it much more enjoyable than like Merfolk Looter, where you just play it and you tap it every turn.
Sure.
I'll add that as a cube designer, that this gives you a little bit more branches into things like legendary matters or historic matters. So it gives you that extra little nugget. And I agree with Ashton that it's more fun to play with instead of just tapping it to draw and discard. Like, why not tap to attack?
Yeah, I do feel like ever since Lord of the Rings came out, like if there's a legendary version of a card and it does the same thing, like I almost want to lean towards the legendary one just in case I want to put what was the Viking set too that has a couple pretty cool legendary matters cards.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Kaldheim. That one was good. Tishana's Tidebinder is a card that I really didn't think anything of, but this card, it's getting played a lot in Standard. I know I only showed the top 19 for some reason. Tidebinder was actually at number 22 of the most played cards in Standard, so it's getting played a ton. It completely shuts down Planeswalkers. It's great against creature lands. It's actually not great against creature lands. So if the creature land...
They would have to have activated it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just animated it and then use another ability of the land. So.
Oh, sure. So it's good against the current creature lands.
Like it Dumpster's Raging Ravine, for example, which triggers an attack.
Oh, it does. Yep. And exactly. All of the new creature lands, they have a triggered ability because then they never loot, right? Because even once they stop being creatures, it's still dumpstering them.
Yeah, and even loses the mana abilities.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, that's pretty good. I mean, that's such a funny hoser if you have those in your environment and you have this. That's nice. That's better than just destroying Planeswalker, or not destroying them, but making them useless. But it seems like the more powerful the cube, the more things there are that you want to be Tidebindering. I don't know, Ashton, what's your dream Tidebinder target with this?
I don't know what my dream Tidebinder target is, or Tidebinder, but I do know what I want to be playing against it, and it's Creeping Tar Pit.
Sure.
Because it just dodges all of those things that you just said. But honestly, I do think this card is really good. Imagine flashing this in against someone who's trying to hoof you, right? Like, they play this wonderful 8/8 that's going to win them the game, and you go, no. Like, they get it through your counters even, and they're like, yes, it landed. No.
All right, that's the dream.
It's a good control card.
Yeah. All right, finally, Sentinel of the Nameless City. I think this it just does so much stuff. Not just sort of obviously it only does one thing, which is create map tokens. But in terms of what it plays with Blink. It plays, if you love lands, if you are trying to mill yourself, if you care about your artifact count, if you care about counter synergies, just feels like it does everything. And then if all you care about is just power and toughness, I mean, 3/4 for 3 isn't bad either. I mean, I don't know. Dan, is there anything that you want to be doing in your green decks that this doesn't do?
No, this is just fantastic value, but I guess I would caution again, like as a hypothetical cube builder, like what you're shutting down with this kind of card are the decks that normally get under the good value engines. I mean, a 3/4 vigilant body is awesome against aggro. It gets to be vigilant in attack, gets to accrue value while it does it. I mean, like I'd caution that like this might make fast decks really bad.
Sure, like only for the highest powered cubes. Like you would say keep it out of most weaker cubes.
Oh,
I mean, given the
yeah,
prevalence at which, sorry, I got to jump in here. Given the prevalence at which like white weenie and red deck wins are like the best archetypes in high-powered cubes, I kind of got to disagree. I think it's okay to throw in something that slows them down.
Ashton, that is the stance that you interrupted that we were making.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know, Ronald, what do you think as far as like this card, like in kind of a medium strength cube? Like, what would you think about this card in my cube?
I think it would be at least great to try it out. Just as instead it fits into so many different archetypes, it'd be really interesting to see, who gets it, what you can do with it.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm so excited about is just there the amount of synergy it enables is really incredible. Of course, the worry about that is like, I don't know, like Fable of the Mirror Breaker is so good in so many synergies, but then when you actually see it played, it's just like the synergy is being good. Um, and like you're not really doing the things that it's like your madness deck is not winning in madnessy ways because it has Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Your madness deck is winning like because Mirror Breaker is so good. So I'd be curious to see how this would do with that.
I do think there's something to be said about it being a card for much more higher powered cubes and less mid power cubes. I think that's where the stifling effect against aggro really starts to come into play.
Yeah, because like in a lot of legacy cubes, mono red is just the best deck, so this is reasonable. But then if you're in a cube where dirtling is the best thing to be doing anyway, like if you've taken out all your Savannah Lions or something, maybe this is a little bit too brutal. Yeah, I'm curious to test this out. I think I'm gonna put it in my cube for a couple drafts and see what it does. If it's too, because my cube's pretty powerful, but it's certainly no legacy cube, and so I'll be curious to see if this is a little bit too sort of overwhelming.
I think it branches really nicely a lot of potential archetypes because map tokens can potentially give you +1/+1 token or counters rather.
Mhm.
It can put things in the graveyard. It can draw you lands. I mean, like it does a lot of stuff, and that's usually like the toolbox sort of thing that I'm looking for, or like the multi-tool thing that I'm looking for.
Sure. And especially giving green something like a lot of cubes, green is just sitting there ramping, and then it's like maybe it's a part of a couple combos, and that's it. So it's nice to have something. I mean, yes, it enables land drops over time, but it's not there ramping. It's like it's a nice rock card that way. The thing that's really blown me away about this set is all of the 1-drops. When I looked on 17 lands, it's like the 1-drops are absolutely dominating the limited environment. I've read a couple articles to that effect as well. Looking it up, like Ruin Lurker Bat is the #1 non-rare white card. Warden is the #3 overall white card. Spyglass Siren is the #3 blue card. I didn't even look up black, green, or red because I had just seen enough when I got to 2 colors. I don't know. These are amazing. Dan, you've played a good amount of the limited of this set, right? Like, what do you think of one drops when you're drafting it.
Well, I do view those numbers certainly as a kind of a best of one echo chamber, but there
Sure.
is so much support for just if you get ahead and stay ahead. Like the removal is fine in the set, but is it so good that you're spending 2, 3, 4 mana and are happy to remove the one drop that is just clocking you? So yeah, I think these are superb in draft. Like as far as cube stuff, I mean, unless we were looking for other like really cool synergy stuff, I mean, like I'm not really excited about any of these one drops. Like I wouldn't be going out of my way to put them in a cube unless I had a one drop of like color that was not interesting or just not performing that well.
How about you, Ronald? Like, could I get you to play a low curving deck with a bunch of one drops that aren't necessarily Savannah Lions?
I mean, if the deck is there, I would try it. I think Warden could have some potential.
Sure.
It's a bit of a cost having to tap 3 things as a sorcery, but you get the scry as well. I think the scry is really what pushes it over the top.
Sure, like in a tokens deck.
Just be able to have that momentum and keep going where you can keep getting to the next card you need to keep executing your plan. The other ones are, they're fine. Had a draft deck with a couple of Stalactite Stalkers, and I liked what that one does. If you can keep descending, get big, and then eventually when you really need to, just trade it off for one of their creatures.
Mm-hmm. I mean, double Stalker in a deck that can descend every turn sounds awful to play against. That sounds like such a nightmare.
Actually, a mono black draft deck, and yeah, it was kind of a couple of those things that mill yourself, and just a lot of ways to send it. It was kind of fun. It performed okay, but it was fun when it worked.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the cube, I guess. Whether a deck that's full of one drops is really going to be able to get the job done before someone else gets to the mid or late game. And just at that point, if you haven't won, you maybe out of it.
Sure. Asha, I feel like if I gave you 1 white for a 1/1 flying draw card, or sorry, not 1 white, 1 blue for a 1/1 flying draw card, or 1 blue for a 1/1 flying 2/2, sorry, a 2/2 flying, you'd like go crazy for it. And I know this is a lot worse than either of those 2 cards, but the fact that it can get you there eventually, I don't know, like, does that tempt you at all with Spyglass Siren in a cube setting, or are you kind of like tuning out any kind of one drops that don't have 2 power?
No, I actually, I'm actually a bigger fan of the blue, black, and green ones for cube than maybe the white or red ones, simply because they have less competition. Actually, the black one probably has the most, and is the third iffiest as a result. But the Siren and the Scout are both, I think, actually really good one drops for aggressive decks in those colors, if that's an archetype you want to put in your cube. I don't know that they're necessarily good enough for super high power cubes, vintage and legacy stuff.
Yeah.
But anything below that, I think they're absolutely fine. And who knows, maybe they are good enough for legacy.
Yes, yeah, Cenote Scout is so interesting as the green one, because like there's in most cubes, what green is doing with their one drops is just like all mana dorks, or it's Hex Drinker, which is just like the most broken. God, I'm trying to remember the original Boros level up guy, but Hex Drinker is the most absurd one of those level up guys in the game.
Figure of Destiny.
Oh yeah, Figure of Destiny. Thank you. Yeah. Hex Drinker is the most absurd Figure of Destiny, but like in a slightly depowered cube. I don't know, Dan. Like, do you think I could convince you to play a green deck that was trying to do something like Cenote Scout instead of going for mana dorks?
Oh yeah, getting your archetypes outside the box, or at least getting some cards in there that can push one outside of a box. Like green, typically not an aggro color. I mean, a 1 mana 2/2 does it. Like I love exploring cube. I mean, any excuse to play more of it or design a cube with more of it, I think is worth taking. I'm thinking what you're replacing your green one drops with. or which one green one drops you're replacing. I mean, like you're talking about some pretty beloved mana dorks, so I think you really would have to lean into it with some additional archetype support.
Yeah, you'd have to go pretty hard. I agree with that. I agree. Like, I think that's true of Goblin Tomb Raider too. Is like you'd have to be all in on artifact aggro. Which you were talking to me, Dan, about feeling like this set does a really good job supporting artifact aggro in general. I think you wanted to talk about Dire Flail and Dowsing Device for that too. Like, what are your thoughts on that in general as a kind of an archetype coming out of this set?
Well, I mean, it has to be supported because Dire Flail is a cool equipment. I mean, it is a bone splitter, so I do think that one can stand on its own. But the opportunity to not only have another artifact to craft with it for 3 red, but also getting that attack ability where you get to sacrifice any artifact other than Dire Blunderbuss when you do this creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature. So you can stack up lifelink, you can start machine gunning things with death touch creatures. It can be a really super fun and cool combo, but making it feel supported without making it absolutely overpowered, as Dire Flail probably could be, is really the cube builder's trick here.
Yeah. Ronald, you've certainly like been willing to just go, at least in drafts that I've seen, you've been willing to go with just, I'll take the cheapest red card out of every pack here. Do you feel like just straightforward red aggro is fun, or like do you feel like making the red section of a cube be really artifacty is like an interesting twist on it? I don't know. Like, how would you feel about that as kind of the aggro version or the aggro piece of a cube?
Yeah, this I do like doing a good red deck wins all the time. Definitely, artifacts would be an interesting way to give a little bit of a twist. Especially, we're talking about all the map tokens in this set. Those would be good to sacrifice, or treasure tokens, any sort of, not necessarily food tokens in red, but I think that could be fun.
Yeah, blood tokens like that too. I often just, the number of times I've gone through Scryfall or Gatherer and just been like, why are the blood token cards not better? But that could be something that could work too, especially in a lower powered cube where maybe it doesn't matter that the blood token cards aren't like overwhelmingly powerful. Personally, like I often have a tough time wanting to draft red in cubes because personally I'm not always that win motivated when I play. I like winning, but it's more I hate going 0-3, but I'll have the same amount of fun going 1-2 as I'll have going 3-0. So like it's hard to convince me that red cards are cool enough for me to go with mono red. So personally, I really like the idea of artifact aggro. I don't know. Ash, I don't really see you draft mono red a lot either. Like what?
I do find a lot of mono red to be kind of just boring, just because it plays out the same way a lot of the time. I'm probably a bit more win oriented than you are, but I'm not gonna draft mono red if that's just because I want to win. I want to play an archetype because it's fun, and I do think adding some artifact theming to that helps out a lot. The other thing this is also really handy for is if you want to theme your entire cube around artifacts or something like that. Cards like this can help a lot. Although what I really want to talk about here is Abuelo. I love Gramps.
Okay.
That card is awesome, and he is just so much fun to play with. I've mentioned it before, but cards that are fun and flavorful are way more important to me than necessarily raw power. Abuelo brings all of that, and honestly, I kind of also want to make a commander deck around him too.
I think Abuelo can be good in a lot of different cubes too, because if you are in a cube where the ETB effects are really powerful, Abuelo's absolutely worth it. And if you're in a cube where everything's not as powerful, well, guess what? A 2/2 flying ward 2 for 3 is a reasonable place to start. And then you can have, 3 mana to recycle these weaker ETB effects is perfectly reasonable too. I don't know, Dan, like what is your dream kind of situation for Abuelo in a cube?
One where you get him on the battlefield and you get to do the thing while your opponent waits to accrue that additional 2 mana for their spot removal spell. Like, you don't expect a 2/2 flyer for 3 to dominate the game, but if you get the chance to tilt the game in your favor, I think this is the perfect power level for like the type of cube design that I like to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like my cube's not oriented towards this theme, but it's the perfect power level of my cube, which is like, I mean, you and I have always been kind of on the same page of like that, what types of games we like kind of creating in our cubes. But yeah, I think it's so cool. I don't know, like Ronald, do you have any any thoughts on this card?
Yeah, I just like that it fits in the theme of basic blink decks, which I think can be a lot of fun, but protects itself, so it's more likely that it's going to get to do what you want it to do, at least some of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I like to make the comparison to what cards you would be looking to take out of a cube.
Mm-hmm.
And, if your cube still has it, you might be playing like Geist of St. Traft, which, I mean, I think everybody has played with and against enough hexproof creatures that at least Abuelo gives your opponent an opportunity to play a game rather than just like, oh, I got the Bone Splitter or whatever.
Yeah, it gives you a fighting chance.
Yeah, I think at this point for me, Geist of St. Traft is like, it's nostalgia only for me, because I agree, like that card is either bad or unfun. I don't know if there's a situation where Geist can be the reason you won a game and your opponent had a good time in that game. I don't know, like, has anyone here faced down Geist like a lot?
Is anyone here playing Historic on Arena recently? Combo deck where you put a ley line into play, and then you play the 1 mana spell that replaces the card that you target with a cheaper permanent, and the only cheaper permanent you can hit is Geist State Traft. You get Geist State Traft into play on turn 1.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Like you said,
that sounds awful.
Basically, someone puts the ley line into play. Okay, fine. I'm going to the next game.
Oh my god. All right, I would like to replace Geist with Abuelo in both Cube and in Historic, please. Obviously a lot less powerful on turn 1 than Geist would be. Oh my god. Yeah, I think if you're doing stuff like that in your high power cubes, keep Geist in, but they don't necessarily have to always be competing for the same thing. I just think Abuelo is really cool. I don't think I'll be putting it in my cube, but just because that's not what my themes are, I think this card's awesome. Another card I think is really awesome, kind of a similar cycle sort of these sort of gold legends, is Anim Pakal, Thousandth Moon. I really noticed this card in the festival, like the Lost Caverns of Ixalan story decks. I hope they do this for every single set. I learned a ton about kind of what all the cards do in a sort of less powerful than constructed but more powerful than limited setup, which was like perfect for cube, right? And Anim Pakal is worse than Adeline, yes, but Adeline is busted, right? I mean, Adeline is in the most powerful vintage cubes still, and can sometimes be dominant in those cubes. Being a little bit worse than Adeline is not a crime, and I really like, certainly I'm into multicolored cubes in general, but I really like forcing the aggro decks in your cube to have to splash colors to really, turn into fully operational battle stations, like giving aggro players an incentive to make those kinds of sacrifices, to maybe have to take second looks at their mana base, something like that, I think can be really cool. And Anna and Pakal is just incredible when it's if you play it and attack the same turn. I mean, that card just gets ridiculous. Um, I don't know. Like, I kind of had to go off on this card, but has anyone actually like faced down this card or seen it in action much?
This was my pre-release promo, and I did misread it at first. It's when you attack with anything. It's not when you attack with it.
Uh huh.
So what I like about the kind of this can be a snowbally card, but all you need to answer it is a 2 damage spell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It gives your opponent real counterplay while also just, it'll end the game if they don't have it.
I haven't played. I don't think I've played with it against it myself, but I've seen it in games I've been watching online. Yeah, the fact that you don't have to attack with it, I think it makes a big difference. There's similar cards in this set that have an attack trigger, but they only trigger if that creature itself attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And this being able to get in a couple attacks while this is on the board, or maybe if you have a way to pump or to put +1/+1 counters on it without attacking, you can sort of skip ahead.
Sure.
I think it's really easy to get in a game a state where your opponent can't win unless they have a way to sweep the board.
I don't know, Ashton. Like, have you seen this card in action at all?
I have not, so I can't really speak to it a whole lot. It does look pretty fun to play with, but it's no like Rabble Master, for example. It can snowball, but I don't know if it's going to do that a lot, depending on how your cube is set up, I guess. I don't know.
Sure, fair enough.
The tokens are artifacts, so that like you can build around that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I did not realize that part. So yeah, throw it in with another artifact cube.
Yeah, I really like the artifact aggro stuff in this set, especially with Modern Horizons 2 essentially having the exact same themes in Boros. You can really get a lot done now as far as making artifact decks that are really fast, which is kind of cool. Going kind of around the horn of these multicolor legends, I think that the Orzhov ones are really interesting for Cube. Bartolome del Presidio, I didn't do that one very well, but sacrifice another creature or artifact to get a counter on it is a really interesting difference from Cartel Aristocrat. I don't know, like, Ashton, which one in your sacrifice decks are you more interested in having on your board?
I think that's actually going to depend a lot on what the rest of the cube looks like, and whether or not there's a fair amount of creature combat or whether or not there's a lot of removal spells.
Sure.
If you're dealing with removal a lot, you definitely want the Aristocrat. But if you're dealing with creature combat, I think Bartolome might actually be better.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then also there's that difference where Cartel Aristocrat, of course, great against removal, but not a win condition in and of itself. Like if you manage to get infinite sac effects, whereas Bartolome is a win condition in and of himself, which I think is really interesting. I mean, you could certainly have both if you wanted to. If you wanted to make, say, persist combos, like a really huge piece of your cube, you could just stick both in there. Have any of you guys tried the persist combo stuff in my cube? I mean, where would you play this a lot? What are you thinking there?
I don't think I've tried it. I think it's been a while since I've gotten to draft a cube, actually. It definitely made me, want to get a chance to do it, especially with all the new cards you're talking about putting in. Yeah, but I think that would be a fun deck to try out.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about the combo potential. That's a very good point. And my knee-jerk reaction is that I would prefer the Cartel Aristocrat in almost every case, because it is much harder to answer.
Sure.
But, I mean, Bartolome can be a combo piece, and that is really crucial.
I was thinking I would probably prefer Bartolome generally. If you're having to sacrifice, especially because of the combat issue, if you're having to sacrifice to save your Coachella aristocrat in combat is just going to have to keep sacrificing again and again. Whereas with Bartolome, it's getting bigger. You get to a point where you don't have to sacrifice unless you want to.
And there's this thing where, like, especially if you're comboing, they really want to kill your, like, Anafenzas, etc., because you have fewer of those. I mean, I guess maybe that changes towards the late game once they kind of figure out things like that. But it's nice to have a second thing that sort of must kill, depending on what your balance of sack outlets and other little pieces is in your aristocrat decks.
And I'll point out that Bartolome can sack an artifact, so that can also influence how you're building your deck or how you're drafting your deck. Could be better in a lot of circumstances.
And it also really doesn't take much to make Bartolome a big threat. Like, pop a couple of map tokens and a creature token, and you're a 5/4. Doesn't take too many hits from that for the game to end real quick.
I've thought of the combo if anyone wants to hear it.
Yeah, shoot.
Okay, so Bartolome, obviously. We'll have Emery, and we'll have Blood Fountain, which is a single black for a black artifact that when it enters the battlefield creates a blood token. So you can sacrifice the Blood Fountain, you can sacrifice the blood token, you can get it back with Emery. You can resuscitate Emery or Bartolome with the Blood Fountain's ability, and you just ride that tricycle all the way home.
Oh, that's incredible. That's awesome.
I'm sure there's plenty of other 3-card combos you can do with it.
This is only 3 cards. $3, 3 cards.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. I mean, it is cool that there is more combos that this can do than just the persist stuff that Cartel Aristocrat can do. I mean, I know there's other infinite sack combos than the persist engine, but it is. I hadn't thought about how Artifact opens that up. I think that's really cool. Kind of getting into the other 2-mana Orzhov legend is Amalia Benavides Aguirre. I think it's really interesting lately. WotC's been putting a lot of effort into making life gain decks kind of actually do something interesting. I think this trigger of exploring every time you gain life is fascinating. I think the destroy all other creatures is kind of silly, but I think that's to make it harder to be really annoying with wild growth, or maybe it's to just force the damage through once you've gotten there. I'm not sure. But Amalia does go infinite with Wild Growth Walker. I think that combo is kind of hard to pull off in Cube because you would have to somehow assemble all these, and there's not sort of other redundant pieces to the combo. But she is pretty interesting with lots of different life gain effects. Ronald, what do you think of Amalia?
Yeah, I like Amalia a lot. I've been playing a standard deck with Amalia in it, which is the 1-drop every time a creature. You get a creature, you gain life, and then when it dies, you can bring it back to the 1/1 flyer that gains you life.
Oh yeah, the Disturb one.
But exactly, the Disturb one, blanking on the name. But again, it's that same thing I was saying earlier, where you get the momentum going. So if you start gaining life, then you're exploring. Oh, this card doesn't help me keep gaining life. I can get rid of it. Or hey, here's a land I need.
Mm-hmm.
So it's growing bigger. It's protecting itself a little, and it's just helping you keep executing your game plan.
So I'm looking through Scryfall. Colossification comes to mind. Enchanted creature gets +20/+20. I can see that as being an Amalia combo. All you need is something that triggers when you have an aura or enchantment enter the battlefield.
You have to hit it when its power is exactly 20, though, right? So that would skip the. I think that would skip the Wrath.
Oh,
Yeah,
it
you can get the
absolutely
trigger
would.
that way.
So like a 22.
But it means you could
creature.
keep growing and growing it without blowing everything up if you wanted to for some time.
I played a bunch of Historic Brawl with Trelasara. I think it's Trelasara the Moon Sage, I think is the card. Kind of an obscure, uncommon from the D&D set. And it's whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it and scry one. And I'm really curious about playing that essentially that exact same deck with black instead of green with Amalia. I really like playing Historic Brawl with 2 drops. That's sort of my preferred mana cost in that format. So I'm absolutely going to try this out in Historic Brawl, and if it's good there, it wouldn't really fit in my cube, but there's so many different things you can do, like with food and stuff like that would be pretty good with this card. Finally, as far as sweet cards for kind of low and mid power cubes, Ashton, are you an appreciator of Dance of the Manse?
Yes, always.
Does
That said, I think Abuela's Awakening is really good. I don't know. Like, I like it. I think it's an amazing EDH card. I'm not sure how I feel about it as a cube card.
Yeah, I feel like it has to be a commander cube. I don't know, Dan, like, do you think it's even possible in a regular cube to get this kind of archetype going?
Well, so it kind of concerns me that you would, to really make this hum, you need some cards that no other deck would even potentially want.
Sure.
So if you felt like, oh, I got the like Akroma's Memorial, for example, be a good one. But it's like, okay, well, who's drafting all the 7-drops? 8-drops, 9-drops.
The 7-drop non-creatures.
Not that interesting of a puzzle, honestly.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think that would be why it would really only work in a commander cube. But man, it does seem like it could be cool there. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like having too many Christmas Land thoughts.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of sounds interesting. It's a lot of fun. Get back your artifact or enchantment as a creature. Hope maybe put some counters on it, get the enter the battlefield, and then just be swinging in with it. I still wasn't even thinking about trying to get to like the big, expensive stuff. Which is a good point. But yeah, that's kind of just drafted expensive artifacts, discard them, get them back.
Yeah, because it's like
that said, I am such a combustible Gear Hulk fan fella.
Sure.
And, so Abuela's Awakening can reanimate the 6-drop combustible Gear Hulk because it is an artifact, so it would just come in as a 1/1. And then if your deck is built around absurdly expensive things, then you just get to start flipping 3 things or drawing cards. I mean, I view that as really fun. I don't think those cards are cards that other decks would want.
Yeah. Like you'd have to have a pretty weird cube to make that a thing that lots of people are doing. Fair enough. All right. Finally, the thing that I haven't mentioned a single time this entire review so far is dinosaurs. So I wanted to put up some on the screen. This is poor podcasting for everyone not watching on YouTube, but I wanted to put up a whole bunch of curve examples for dinosaurs to kind of try to figure out, like, is this compelling in various environments? Because they've got some problems, right? They're spread. The good dinosaurs are kind of spread across 3 different colors. That's not a deal breaker in and of itself, but it is, notable. And the dinosaurs seem to be doing different things. Ronald, when you see this array of dinosaurs, like, do you want to build a deck out of this? What kind of deck do you feel like you're building? Like, what do you think about dinosaurs in a cube?
I think it could work. I'm kind of looking at the low drops here and thinking, I want to do, which a lot of them work. You want other dinosaurs, like the Squint or the Marauding Raptor. You need other dinosaurs for those to work. I think it'd be fun to try. You don't have the oh, there it is. No, what's the 3 mana 6/6?
Oh, Snubhorn.
Like that, yeah. There's a lot of things that like only the dinosaur deck would want, and then are you sort of getting into the same issue we were talking about with Abuela's Awakening, where you have these things in your cube that only one deck is going to want.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some here like Rampaging Ferocidon that doesn't have to be in a dinosaur deck. Obviously, that can go in any aggressive red deck.
Yeah,
that one in particular, I think it's worth fighting over. Like that's a really good one to point out.
Yeah.
Like that branches all archetypes, or in my opinion, it does.
So I want to preface this by saying that I really wish dinos were cubable, but I don't think they are simply because they lack a solid, coherent mechanical identity. Um, you know, like both Dan and Ronald said, like they're just kind of all over the place. Um, and there's not a whole lot of consistency, whereas like, elves are largely going to be focused on like producing mana, pooping out more elves, and making elves bigger.
Mm-hmm.
um, Goblins are going to be focused on just like trying to be as fast and maybe pump some stuff or throw some extra goblins at you, but just like really trying to be low to the ground. Merfolk are going to be pretty evasive. They're going to grow a lot through their lords. Dinos don't have a huge mechanical identity like that. It's just kind of like we're dinosaurs.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm not playing Kinjali's Sunwing in the same deck as Carnage Tyrant, right? Because like there's weirdly a lot of 3-mana hate bears. I only put up 2 of them here, Sunwing and Ferocidon, but there's a whole bunch of mid-drop hate bears in Dinosaurs. And it's not like, yeah, when you were saying that, I was thinking about like vampires. Vampires have had a million different mechanics, but every single one has been about we want to attack and accrue value at the same time. And it can be tough to have your cake and eat it too, but every single vampire mechanic has been about value through attacking, never being all in attacking, but always being into it. And it's just like we gain strength from attacking you. And so it's like all these different mechanics actually do synergize with each other, just like you were saying, Ashton. And yeah, other than the dinosaurs that are like I do X if you have a dinosaur, I don't really see, for example, like Marauding Raptor synergizes great with Ripjaw Raptor, but it doesn't synergize with Shifting Ceratops. And that can be kind of tough.
I will say that I really like Quartzwood Crasher because if I remember right, that is essentially a trample lord. So that one branches a lot of things, but is obviously like really locked into the Gruul color pair.
That's true. I mean, a lot of dinosaurs do have trample, especially a lot of the expensive ones. So that could be.
Yeah. I mean, it branches into dinosaurs. So I pulled it up just so I could be sure to get the name right. So Elder Gargaroth does a thing, which is be a 5-mana 6/6 vigilance, reach, trample. Crucially, not a dinosaur. So dinos can be like these big rate monsters where they're really efficient on curve, or that archetype when it was in standard was called monsters. So the Dino Thunder is kind of stolen just by large green things that you'd probably rather play with. So Elder Gargaroth, I think, is a really good example of like that mid-range powerhouse. It's like, well, why would I try to stack up? Like Regisaur Alpha is really efficient and good card, but like, why would I force myself to draft lesser cards around it when I could just have Elder Gargaroth in one color?
Yeah, so like
or even like a Thrag Tusk or
something.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I love Thrags.
Yeah, so like as the cube designer, you'd really have to browbeat your players and like really cut every single like Naya mid-range all-star from the cube to get people to play dinosaurs. And that sounds pretty rough. I'm really sad that we are like this down on them because I was also down on them, but I just wanted to put these up here because I just feel like it's a failure of these two, I guess we're on 3 Ixalan sets now. I just feel like it's a failure of imagination or of design, or I don't know what went wrong, but I just the fact that I don't want to cube dinosaurs makes me really sad. I don't really want to EDH them either, so it's like, where are we at with these? They are a little more coherent in EDH, but go on, Ashton.
I think it comes from Wizards not wanting to turn Kindred decks into like super linear decks.
For sure.
But that's also what gives them that kind of mechanical identity. Is like if all of your decks for vampires in or if all of your vampires in one set share these specific mechanics, then the next time you come back to vampires, you, even if you're using a different mechanic, you can still copy the themes of the previous mechanic, and that's what's really lacking in dinosaurs, and is what makes them so hard to put into cubes.
Yeah, like you don't need a if you have a dinosaur do a thing, you just have to do like a, if you have, or like, yeah, exactly. Just have them working towards the same goal. And, some of them want to be these mid-range beatdown pieces. Sometimes you want to have these giant ramp finishers. And then, of course, there's Raptor and Ferocidon that are just like, yeah, we ping things. So, yeah, it's tough. It makes me sad, but thank you for going on this tragic walk through the jungle with me. I want to talk about some cards I think are bad, and you guys can tell me I'm crazy if if you disagree. I'm going to start with the 2 highest win rate cards in the entire set's limited environment, which is Bonehorde Dracosaur and Aclazot's Deepest Betrayal. It's not that I think these 2 cards are trash, but I just don't know that a cube really has room for many cards like this. So I just don't know how much I could really put it into a cube. Like Ronald, are you particularly compelled by either of these 2 cards in a cube setting?
I think more so Acquazots. I mean, the Dracosaur that's on its own, it just does its own thing. The Acquazots synergizes with discard. So you can do more interesting things there. And then if it dies, it's not lost permanently. It comes back to the land, and maybe you can flip it back, especially if you're making them discard a lot. But it's just a more interesting card. The Dracosaur, like I say, it's another 5-mana big red flying creature, which there are a lot of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ashton, are you at all interested in like 5-mana flyers that don't have haste? But I mean, legitimately, both of these are incredible if you untap with them. But I don't know. Are you interested in this kind of game?
I think it really is going to come down to what you want the removal of your cube to look like. If you want to have a really low power in terms of removal, but moderate power in terms of creatures, I think they're fine. I will say I'm not a huge fan of gods in general. I just don't like cards that are functionally unkillable. That's just really annoying. But
Sure.
That's a personal thing, so not everyone has to listen to me on
that. That's valid complaint.
I mean, Dan, you're generally not into unkillable cards either, right? Though these 2 cards, the problem is they're very killable. I don't know. What do you think of these kind of 5-mana untap and win creatures?
I think if you really examine your removal suite or your interactive suite, and maybe take a look at, I don't know, say giving each color at least, I don't know, hypothetically, say like 2 options to deal with these type of god creatures that are not just destroy target creature. At the very least, I mean, like exile removal is obviously like really good and necessary in a cube, but a pacifism effect or 2, like that can be very good. I really like the Frogify type effects, turning things into legitimate business people. I think is a flavor win no matter what plane you're on. So just giving those type of options. But that said, I mean, like it's good because it is a 5-mana 4/4 flying lifelink. Like that is what makes it good.
Sure.
So in a cube environment, I think like this isn't like an egregious card. It's just not particularly interesting.
And to me, I feel like it's maybe just underpowered in a lot of cube environments because a lot of cubes have more removal than a regular limited set would. Though I think most cubes have room for like 1 card like this in every color, because it can be really nice to have something like that. And these are great if you untap with them. Like the right control deck could be really interested in something like this. But in general, it's so hard to include cards like this in a cube.
I think as far as the design philosophy, so when Alclazatz dies and then transforms into a land, it can untransform, 2 in a black, tap, transform, but activate only if a player. Never mind. I thought it was only if an opponent. Okay, that's a lot less interesting. So basically, like if your idea is, hey, you have agency as long as you don't play your cards, is extremely unfun. But it also the controlling player gets to do it, which makes it heinous. That's a terrible card. Keep it out of the cube.
All right, fair enough. I also want to talk removal spells. Let's do Bitter Triumph first. So I think Infernal Grasp and Bone Splinters are not particularly interesting cards. And Bitter Triumph is essentially either or. It's either a worse Infernal Grasp or a worse Bone Splinters. Bone Splinters might not be the one that can hit Planeswalkers, but there is one that was essentially a power crept Bone Splinters that can. Ashton, are you excited about having the option of which one it can be, or are you sort of out on the card?
I think if you didn't dislike this card, it would probably be on one of the high-powered cube slides. I think this card is actually really good.
Okay.
Especially if high-powered cubes start getting to be more creature-based aggressive, which I think they might, given Wizards' current design philosophy.
Legacy cubes for sure, yeah.
I can definitely see this being just like a turn to kill your creature and discard my fatty, reanimate it, like untap, reanimate, haha, I win. It could be really good.
Yeah, as a reanimation enabler, I think it's much more reasonable. I think in a cube without Reanimator, I'm not as interested at all. But you're right. In a cube where you're doing really powerful graveyard things and that discard can be a benefit, it's like Bone Splinters still usually isn't, or no, that's not the discard one, is it? Yeah, that does make it a little bit more interesting. I don't know, Ronald, are you happy with Bitter Triumph? Like, what do you think about this card?
I think it's a good card. Having the option to either discard a card or a life. You can kill whatever you need to kill, and just whichever cost is a little easier for you to bear.
Were there any Hellbent cards that are still in anyone's cube? I'm trying to think of one, and I literally have none in my brain.
I remember Marrow once saying that he didn't want to do Madness ever again because it was way too hard to enable in Limited and wasn't fun enough to justify it. I'm sure he's walked that back, but I do remember that from a Blogatog once, because it's just so hard to make those discard decks really all that compelling, other than specifically like I'm putting very specific powerful graveyard cards in my graveyard. Otherwise it can just be really tough to make them good.
I think there could be a way to make Madness and discard stuff fun. It's always been a limited archetype I've enjoyed when it's pulled off well, but it is very difficult to pull off well.
I do want to add one more thing that it's good that this can destroy Planeswalkers, which is why you're paying that cost. If you're if your cube doesn't have a lot of Planeswalkers, and this card's not very interesting because you can kill creatures without having to discard a card or pay 3 life.
Yeah.
Using other cards.
And one thing...
Ronald, are you saying that Bitter Triumph dies to Doomblade?
I guess you could put it that
way. One thing that had made me not like this card was I was watching a Jim Davis stream, actually, and he was explaining why Infernal Grasp is bad, because Modern Magic just every single deck cares about life totals. Like even control decks have like Wandering Emperor in the deck, and it's spitting out 2/2s after it comes down and kills something. And now like the control deck is hitting you while it's trying to control you. And even the ramp deck, it's got like was it Topiary Stomper? So it's like it, even if it whiffs on all the ramp packages, it's still hitting you for 4. And so like losing life no matter what is kind of bad. But you guys are kind of turning me around on like at least the optionality a little bit. I can kind of see that. And the one thing is, if I was going to make the argument with Get Lost, that having powerful removal with a downside like makes new things happen and makes interesting decisions happen, I feel like I kind of have to concede that with Bitter Triumph too. Like it is at least creating interesting decisions for players in a way that like Doomblade would not. Last one of these cards that I think is really bad, that I've heard a lot of hype about, was the White Unearth Helping Hand. I just think not having cycling just makes this card like completely different, because like Unearth has always just been so bad in your opening hand, and obviously incredible like in the mid game, like especially after the first couple exchanges when you are maybe on turn 4 you're double spelling because you're playing your 3-drop and you're getting back your 2 that just traded in combat, like something like that. But I don't know, Dan, are you a bigger fan of this? Do you think the color shift does anything interesting? What do you think about this card?
I would view this purely as an aggro value card. I'm not really seeing it as like a linchpin of any combo type strategy. I mean, nothing really game breaking is entering with mana value 3 or less, and it also enters tapped. You know, like it's a huge cost. Like, I mean, especially the direct analog is Unearth, and it's no Unearth, which is also just a very good value card. It's hard to miss with that. With Helping Hand, you can absolutely miss with this card.
Yeah, you can. And then also just looking down the list of sort of top cards in the limited environment in the set, once I get past these cards I don't like, there's a bunch of cards near the top that I didn't hear much about in spoiler season, and I also didn't personally think very highly of, that have been really incredible in limited. Win rates above 62% are pretty freaking high. So first I want to talk about the pirates, Kitesail Larcenist and Breaches Eager Pillager. Both of these just do so much for 3 mana. Breaches in particular is just so... Man, have you guys been had to I'm just like so traumatized from the memory that I can't even talk, but have you guys faced down someone who played Breaches on turn 3 with a pirate already in play?
Oh, Breaches is just so absurd. I don't know if there's a critical mass of good enough pirates yet, but I really want a pirate archetype in someone's cube at some point. Like, and cards like Breaches are what make it just fun to play with. Like, yeah, it's pretty brutal, but it also ends the game quick, and it's really fun to play with if you're the person attacking.
Yeah.
I think the nice thing about Breaches, you don't need like your deck to be full of pirates to make Breaches work. You've got a handful of other good pirates, you could play it. And, you know, get it down to pirates, sometimes maybe you hit done first and then get to attack with him. But I think that's the point in its favor, that it works even if your deck isn't 100% pirate focused.
Yeah, my opinion is that I would steer clear of other pirates that were very good or at least uncontested. You know, so like say Ragavan is a good example of something that other people would want. So if the person with Breaches, say, only gets Ragavan 50% of the time in their deck, then yeah, like let's make that work. But if there's just a bunch of pirates that nobody wants, and it's like, oh, haha, I got Breaches and all the pirates, and you don't get to have any fun because this card is not fun. I think it sucks.
Like, you think going against this card sucks?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a snowball. I mean, it's an absurd turn 3 play where it's like, okay, you don't get to block anymore. I mean, a 3/3 first strike is a pretty good body on turn 3. And then, you know, it can accrue value in the form of cards. It can ramp. It gets in there. and whenever a pirate you control attacks. So all three of those options are on the table if you have three pirates attacking, and that's kind of oppressive. I don't like it.
Fair enough. One thing I do like about the pirates that are in this set is, other than breaches, I mean, they are kind of about something. I guess breaches is about treasure tokens, but you have to be doing pirates to get treasures. A lot of the pirates in this set say, like, if you're doing treasures, get something, or they just enable your treasures. So, like Kitesail Larcenist, for each player, choose up to one target artifact or creature they control, and Kitesail Larcenist gets to turn it into a treasure, which is so cool because you can put their coolest thing into a treasure and your like random garbage into a treasure. Now, treasures kind of are random garbage, so you're turning like a 1/1 into a treasure, but that can sometimes be worth it if you're slow on lands or something like that. And I really like that for theming. I mean, I just keep coming back to Ashton, what you said about having your kindred decks talk to each other across releases with that, and just having the pirates be about something, I think is really cool. Like, do you think I chose the wrong group to do our like archetype deep dive in with this set?
No, I just think I have a soft spot for pirates.
Fair enough.
I mean, I've talked a lot of garbage here, but the first iteration of my first cube had a strong pirate component.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have a question. How many people have played with breaches versus playing against breaches?
I've only.
I never draw my best cards, so my opinion is irrelevant here.
Okay, so it sounds like I might be the only person that's actually played with the card, and playing with it is very, very fun, I must say.
I've faced it down a few times. Ronald, have you played with or against it at all?
Not limited. I feel like I maybe did in one of the arena events. Yeah, it's actually right. It is a fun card to play with. You can get that card down turn 2, get some 3, and then just go to town.
Another couple 3-drops are that I think have been way better than I thought they would be in this set are Sanguine Evangelist and Huatli, Poet of Unity. I'll start with Huatli because I think this is a really interesting card as far as fixing everything about like a dinosaur theme that those other dinosaurs don't. Huatli is essentially just a civic wayfinder, but with kind of an extra saga on the back if you get to 5 mana, which of course having a civic wayfinder makes it really easy to do that. But what's so cool about Huatli is she's really powerful, but you only need one other dinosaur in your deck to make her powerful. You probably want to have 2, right? Because just in case you draw one, but she's really cool that way where you could have a cube with just a few dinosaurs and like put Huatli in, and now you have a dinosaur deck despite only having maybe 5 or 6 cards dedicated to it. Like
Huatli, I think, is a kill on sight card. If they play Huatli, they get a land, you don't kill it, and they flip it the next turn. I guess it's gonna be 2 more turns because the land doesn't come into the battlefield, but you're probably gonna lose the game. I haven't played with it, but I've played against it, and it's not fun to play against.
Fair enough.
Maybe it's like breaches that way, but frustrating card. And it doesn't win the game right away. But you're like, okay, well now they get 2 dinosaurs, and they do this, and you just sit there for like 4 more turns until they kill you.
Oh, you're right, because it's 2 turns until you get to flip it, and then when you flip it, you have to wait an additional. So you're promising 3 turns.
You get the dinosaurs, then you get the mana, then you get the search, and then their dinosaurs get double strike and trample, and so finally they kill you. It's like just sitting there, seeing the end coming and not being able to do anything.
You could kill their 2/3. Like I feel like this kind of value is very answerable, but yeah, once it's flipped, you are so far behind.
You don't always have the card in hand to kill their 2/3 when they play it. It's a kill on sight card though. If you can kill it, you have to, and if you can't, then you're in trouble.
So it almost sounds like you could play it in a kind of higher powered cube then, where maybe you can't kill it, but you can try to like race the impending doom, something like that. Ashton, does this answer the dinosaur problems to you?
I don't think it does. Also, I think it's ironic that the best dinosaur card we're talking about is a human. Um, but also, like, the big thing for me is that it is a slow card. Um, yeah, it's a lot of value for the costs. But like, I think it really depends on the power level of the rest of the cube. It's not going to be hard to put in cards that go over the top of this pretty easily. Um, you know, play an Elder Gargaroth, start pooping out 3/3s, and
Crafty Cut Purse is a pirate. It is 3 in blue, 2/2 flash. When it enters the battlefield, each token that would be created under an opponent's control this turn is created under your control instead. So why don't you get 2 dinosaurs? That's all you need.
Fair enough. All right, we found the
Heck yeah.
anti-Huatley tech to put in a cube with Huatley. Like the dinosaurs that would have to be in the cube would have to be pretty darn exciting, right? So it'd be like, maybe it's like you love Zatalpa, and so now you're just putting Huatley in just because Zatalpa's in there, and like you have other sort of reanimator things or something like that. I'm not sure.
Anything but Carnage Tyrant, really.
Oh, just because that would be like really unfun.
yeah, that'd be kind of rough. The other one would be Atali. Both of them would be kind of unfun with Watley.
The newest Atali is the worst design. Oh my god, I'm so upset. It's so nice with Cube where you can just ignore these cards, but like Atraxa and Atali are just such massive mistakes as far as maybe they just don't care about historic. I mean, I know that they don't care about historic brawl, but like ramp cards that do that much when they hit the field and like just end the game that way are just so silly. And that's, Atali is what you want to be getting with Watley, right? And so there's a question of like, is she even worth it if Atali's not in your cube? And then if Atali is in your cube, is this even something you want to support? That's reasonable. A card that...
As an aside, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say 2 nights ago, I played 5 consecutive matches against Atali, and then I quit playing.
Oh man, I've stopped playing commanders that don't go like at least 40% win against Atali. Like it just, if you can't beat Atali 4 out of 10 times, like you just can't even play whatever the commander you're playing or whatever deck you're playing. But I know this is a cube podcast, but oh boy. And I do personally use H-Brawl as like a training ground for cube cards because of the one-on-one nature, you do have to be much lower curve than you are in regular EDH. And so you are creating these sort of synergistic singleton decks that feel a lot like cube decks. So I do see those formats as being very, very similar and talking to each other. But to get to another 3-drop that creates a lot of value, but is in a much more small ball game and a very different game is Sanguine Evangelist. I thought this card was so like kind of weak and do nothing when it came out when it was like in spoiler season. And this card just does everything at once. It's the map tokens of vampires. The battle cry gives you so much value that I don't think about in a go wide deck, but +1/+0 is great. And then the bat is amazing. The fact that it's an ETB trigger, like it synergizes with so many different things. I don't think it's as powerful as Sentinel of the Nameless City, although clearly win rates would disagree with me. I think that has more to do with merfolk in draft right now, but I don't know. Like, Ronald, what do you think about this card?
I haven't really looked at this card too much. It's hard to tell from the Sentinel, but that's a rare. That doesn't seem like the kind of card that would be a rare, especially these days.
I think it gets so much of its power from its death trigger. So, like, worst case scenario, if assuming it's not countered, it enters the battlefield and makes a bat, and say they answer it right away, then you get another bat. I mean, so you've paid 2 and a white for 2 bats. I mean, that's Lingering Souls, kind of.
That's fair. And if you attack on turn 4 with this, now your whole team is huge. You know, they're not winning their fight, or like they're still trading because you're not pumping their defense, but they're dealing a ton of damage. And if you kill this, you have a huge incentive to trade with this in combat. And if you do, they get another bat. Yeah, I think it just plays so much stronger than it read to me on first glance. Ashton, have you seen this one in action at all?
I haven't, but I do want to jump back on my mechanical theming of Kindred's train again, because
Yeah.
like, what do bats do, or what do vampires do? Well, they like to have life linkers. Battle Cry synergizes great with that. What else do they like to do? Well, they like to have bats around so they can sacrifice them. Oh, guess what? Evangelist does that as well. It's very on theme, and I think I think that in some ways is also going to help it a lot as a cube card moving forward, as well as just kind of being a generally flexible, powerful card.
I think, I saw that Zach Hill put it in his standard cube, and that was the first time I'd seen someone like really value this highly. And then now seeing this with such a high win rate in 17 lands, it just has me thinking a lot about it. And yeah, absolutely, Ashton, like the quiet synergies and the way it wants to be attacking, which is also the thing that vampires are doing. Like, yeah, it's very cool that way. I think it's a really well put together card. Finally, I've got two, essentially 5 mana removal spells that I had kind of underestimated in Magmatic Galleon and Unstable Glyph Bridge. Glyph Bridge might just be an effect of like every sweeper is good in retail limited drafts, but Magmatic Galleon I really didn't expect. Have any of you guys played with or against this card?
Yeah, I've had Galleon a couple times. I mean, in draft it's tough to really get the pieces together to trigger it an additional time, but I mean, 3 red, kill something large, get a treasure is relevant, and then a 5/5 crew 2 is also pretty good. So yeah, I think in a lower power cube, maybe a red deck might want that, but generally I'm not going to see it making the cut a whole lot, I don't think.
And then, like, what about the sweeper? Like, in, like, a cube with artifacts, would you be interested in this over Scour Glass? Like, do you think this is more interesting than that? Or would you run them both? I mean, what do you think about the Glyph Bridge?
I am generally not a big fan of sweepers that leave stuff of your opponents behind, especially because like this one is really like it's aiming to clear out creatures, but it doesn't hit all of them. And it's not, especially because like if they have multiple options they get to choose. I don't know, I'm not a big fan. I'd rather just run
it's not the player who cast Unstable Glyph Bridge gets to choose.
Oh, you do? Okay, that makes it a little better. I'd still rather cast just Wrath of God.
Sure, like this would have to be, like you'd have to be taking out sweepers to force you to play this, essentially, or like the cube designer would have to be taking out sweepers to force you to play it. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. I would like, I don't know, it compared to a generic sweeper that actually hits everything. I think I would generally rather have that, even with the possibility of crafting this into other stuff. I don't know. That just doesn't excite me a ton. The craft is really expensive. You have to have another artifact to sacrifice. Just not super appealing to me.
And craft does work with artifacts out of the graveyard. I do think that's cool, as far as like if you had artifact creatures on the battlefield and then one dies and then you craft it like from the yard after it's died. Though it is kind of, it's kind of slow for a lot of cubes, in that you're spending a lot of mana on the next turn, but you do get that 5/3. I don't know, like Ronald, does this kind of play pattern like excite you at all enough that you'd be interested in a cube designer switching a regular Wrath? Like, I don't know, like let's say they said that the 4 mana Wraths are too strong, but they're still going for 5s, but they had Fumigate. Like, if a cube designer told you they were taking out Fumigate in their cube for Glyph Bridge, like would you be excited about that, or would you just kind of like roll your eyes?
I don't know if Fumigate's interesting to me. So I definitely like it more than it sounds like Ashen does. So they keep their worst little creature. You keep your best little creature, assuming they even have a little creature to keep. So I think it's a little better than he's giving it credit for, and I would definitely be interested in playing it. Versus Fumigate, I think that I think it'd be a fair swap to take out Fumigate, put this in, see how it works.
And that was just a random
Fumigate,
example,
again,
but
life
yeah.
gain. Yeah, sure. Like Fumigate, you gain life gain, but probably your life gain trigger's already dead.
Mhm.
The creatures are going to, you're not getting a huge advantage from that. I think then being able to they can either play spells or attack you. Or some decks maybe don't care about attacking you, especially in cube. But that ability on the creature on the flip side isn't nothing either.
I am a fan of the 5/3 flyer on the backside, but yeah, as far as the wrath effect, yeah, it kind of falls a little flat for me, and not really what I'm looking to add in. I mean, I guess I do like permanence on the battlefield. We've been talking a lot about artifacts, which are getting a ton of support, but no, I don't view it as anything super fun. I like what's our white Gear Hulk? Cataclysmic Gear Hulk?
Yeah.
I'd look more into something like that if I want to pay 3 white for this kind of effect.
Yeah, I've actually got Cataclysmic in my cube, and I don't think I'll be taking it out for this. But I don't know. I find the card interesting, but not quite what I'm looking for either. And I do want to kind of get to my cube as kind of the last piece of this. The biggest thing I want to put in is all the Explore stuff. Explore's been not very good in this limited environment. I mean, at least to me, I feel like the artifact stuff in this limited environment is what I want to be playing. But man, like Boat and Sentinel and Spyglass Siren, like I just need to see them all in action because in theory, Explore just does so much, right? Like it helps a landfall deck, which my cube has. It's got Solar Flare help, like as far as the graveyard value stuff. It's got counter synergies. I really wish there were more map cards. What was that, Ronald?
It synergizes with artifacts as well. Well, assuming in terms of map tokens, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ashton, you were a big thinking maps should have been the main mechanic of this set. Like, do you have anything left in you as far as ranting about maps?
I will gush about maps for ages. They're such a wonderful Swiss Army knife. They do so many things, and it's so easy to slot them into so many different archetypes without necessarily changing the flavor or the character of those archetypes. And you don't necessarily need a ton of them if they're good, but if you do have a bunch of them around, it's also really easy to build stuff around them too. I really wish they had put a lot more of them into the set because I don't necessarily have a ton of hopes that they will reprint them, but you never know.
I mean, there's just enough that people will be fighting over them. And then I guess you could balance it maybe by having some kind of hoser, like a Mayhem Devil type effect that makes them at least come at a cost. But yeah, I'd get as many in there as I could just because they're generically good. And honestly, I feel the same way about food in a lot of instances. I feel the same way about treasure, and I feel the same way about blood. I feel like they're absolutely crushing it with these tokens.
Yeah, I
agree with all of that.
Mm-hmm. I could see having just little artifact tokens as a major theme in a cube, and even wanting to slowly pivot over time in my own cube towards having just more and more of that. Because I agree with you. I thought blood was so cool. By the time those two sets were over, or was blood only in the second Innistrad set? Either way, by the time that was over, I just kept looking back why are there not more blood cards? I just felt like blood tokens played so well. Yeah, and I feel the same way with maps. I don't feel that way with treasures, but I'm excited that Karlov Manor is going to bring a whole bunch of clue stuff. I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to even mention clues. Fantastic. Yeah, just Great stuff. Anyway, I do believe in trying to balance it out somewhat because they are generically great. They're fun to play with, but if they could just cost you a little something.
Yeah. My final this or that card comparison question. I currently have Defiler of Flesh in my cube, which is kind of a replacement level 4/4 for 4. That stat line is one of my favorite stat lines in Magic. I have at least one 4/4 for 4 with good abilities in every color in my cube. The Defiler of Flesh is interesting because it can ramp you, but it can also it's got the evasion. That it can be the big card in a deck full of cheap things, or it can be the sort of bridge card in a deck full of expensive things. But I think Starving Revenant's really interesting too. It's another 4/4 for 4, but this one's got kind of a different play pattern to it. It's sort of a ETB Surveil 2, and then you can either choose to draw 2 cards and lose 6 life, or you can, bin 1 and then lose 3 to draw 1 card, or you can just sort of mill 2. I don't know. What do you guys think about these 2 cards against each other? Ashton, let's start with you.
This is one I always struggle with evaluating, partly because I think a lot of specifically black 4/4s for 4, regardless of the text that's on them, they end up being kind of mediocre compared to 4-drops in other colors. I don't know why that is, but that does often seem to be the case. I feel like Starving Revenant has a bit more flavor to it mechanically. The Surveil and Descend mesh together pretty well. It plays into Black's strengths as Reanimator pretty well, and that does tend to be a common theme in cubes. So I would probably prefer the Revenant, but it could go either way.
Fair enough.
I do not particularly like either of these cards, but I guess if I had to choose, I would choose Revenant just because of the utility of the graveyard stuff. And Defiler sort of forces you to narrow your deck building in a way I don't really like.
Yeah, I think I agree with Dan. You're probably not going to get the Descend 8 of Starving Revenant that often, unless you're doing a lot of self-mail and discarding and stuff. But, I'm kind of mad about both of them.
Do you guys have a 4/4 for 4 that comes to mind that you like better than both of these from recent sets?
There's a vampire that's a 3/4 that has an attack trigger. Is it a Hellrider trigger? What is that one? I think it's from the second Ixalan set. Now I need to look it up. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
that's
going to
okay.
name a card that should have been a 4/4 for 4, and that's Sheoldred, the Apocalypse.
Sheoldred, I think, is too strong for my cube. I don't know. What do you think, Ashton? Do you think I could get away with Sheoldred?
It would definitely be one of the best cards in your cube. You might have to up the power level a little bit as well over time to match that. But I think you could maybe stretch and put it in. I don't know. I think it's worth a shot.
So I found, how about a 3/3 for 3? Gix Yawgmoth Praetor is something that I find way more interesting.
Agreed there.
That's actually a card I've thought pretty hard about, and I like it a lot, but there's so many cool 3s. What were you going to say, Ronald?
The black 4/4 for 4 that I like is Draugr Necromancer, but it really wants no lands, so it kind of limits what you can do with it in terms of building a cube. You're just going to put it in there with all snowlands, and you want to support other snow stuff. But I like Draugr Necromancer.
I do think that card is pretty sweet. I actually like the cube format where you have all the lands just be snow-covered lands. So people can't even put regular lands in their cube, and you just have snow-covered stuff only. The only issue is a purely logistical one. Like, am I gonna, buy all these snowlands? No. It's like, am I gonna print them? Well, at that point, actually, the cost of printing them starts to add up too. If I'm printing 200 snowlands, even if I get it down to like 25 cents a print, that's still, it's like am I going to pay $50 for Draugr Necromancer is a little bit tough, but I do agree with you that
Start to your basics.
What? Just Sharpie all the basics, yeah. That is an aesthetic bridge that I'm not willing to cross yet, but and I don't think I'd...
go to the craft store and buy a bunch of snowflake stickers and just slap those on the wing.
Yeah. That's not a bad idea. We'll see we'll price out 200 snowflake stickers and see where that gets me. I don't think I'd go through all that just for Draugr Necromancer, but I definitely think that is a pretty cool card. Well, so the quest for an interesting...
Devouring Sugar Maw is a 2 black 6/6.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I have a question about Sugar Maw. We didn't fully... I don't think we dug in hard enough to that one last time when we did Eldraine. Would you play... Because it is playing in the themes of my cube pretty well, but would you play Sugar Maw in a deck that didn't have white? If you were in...
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very, very high cost.
Yeah, because
the fact that you have to do it every turn. That's as a fan of Lord of the Pit, that's a really high price to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think without white, you're losing access to a lot of the cards you would use to, say, create tokens or good playable cheap artifacts and enchantments.
Yeah. I think I agree, which means all of a sudden I'm looking at it for Orzhov's section, which I think it would be a reasonable include there. But it does mean the search for a mono black 4-drop moves on. I mean, I do have some 4-drops I really like. I think Henrika Dumnathi is a recent include that I think has just been incredible. I think that card's incredible. But the slot that used to belong to Ashling the Extinguisher now is for Defiler of Flesh, and I feel like finding the perfect card for that slot is a quest I'll just continue on.
I've always liked Nightmare Shepherd, but I think it spawns some kind of some extremely powerful decks, which I guess it could be balanced just by how you build the cube. But Nightmare Shepherd, if your non-token creatures die, you exile it and create a token that's a copy, except it's a 1/1.
Yeah, that one is pretty powerful. That might actually be a more interesting include. I think I'll let Defiler have a couple more drafts to see if it ends up interesting anybody, but I think Shepherd might be a good place to go if Defiler doesn't sort of earn itself any fans in the next couple drafts. That's all I've got for this set. I think this is a cool set, but not necessarily an all-star compared to some of the other recent sets we've gotten. I think Eldraine was just... I feel completely spoiled by Eldraine. I know Holly was saying that in our draft or in our chat, but Eldraine just did so many things right that it's so hard for a set to live up to that. But I do think this set, if this had come out 5 years ago, I would have been like, wow, this is so much more interesting than... Or what was back when 2019 was ruining Magic, if you could have just subbed out any of those 2019 sets for this one, I would have been so pumped. So I do like the set, even though maybe Loader and Eldraine overshadow it a little bit. I don't know. What do you guys think about this one?
A lot of fun cards. I'd say it's limited environment is not really doing it for me, but there is a ton of stuff with a lot of little moving pieces, and that's how I love to put cards together and think about cube.
I think that's part of what makes maps so much fun is they add a lot of those little moving pieces, and yeah, that is what makes the game fun.
I want to say one card that you didn't mention that I like a lot is Sovereign Okonek Ahau. And I think that's worth considering for a cube. And then about to say in general, I like it. It's very wordy, which seems to be what modern design is these days. Lots of words on the cards. So it would be nice if we could if they could simplify things a little bit, but it's hard when they're designing a lot for constructed and for EDH.
I also have a card we didn't mention that I think is very good. It's the one in red 2/2 Inti, Seneschal of the Sun. And whenever you attack, you may discard a card. If you do, put a 1/1 counter on target attacking creature and it gains trample until the end of turn. And then whenever you discard a card, you exile the top card of your library. You can play it until your next end step.
I'm glad you brought that up because Inti is a really sweet card too. It plays kind of similar to Breaches in some ways, but not quite as oppressive.
I mean, it's oppressive, but it's a 2/2 for 2 that requires answering, right? So I guess if you have cheap spot removal in your cube, then this card can be fun in a cool way, and if it's hard to answer, then it's fun in a crappy way.
I actually did get to play with that card a little bit, and I ended up not liking it because I misplayed so bad, which is not the card's fault. That's my fault. But that discard decision is a really interesting one because a +1/+1 counter is not usually worth a card, and so you really want to get something that you can play. So I find that that's a really interesting dynamic as far as like if you have a 1-drop and you play Inti on 2 and you attack with your 1-drop, you had to play a land to play Inti, you don't have any mana open. Do you discard to get that counter on the 1-drop? I think I chose yes because YOLO, and I was wrong and I lost because of it. But I think it's a really interesting decision. So it's a cool card. It's a very skill testing card for sure. Okonek Ahau, I'll in editing, pop these cards up on stream. This is the 2 green white 3/4 ward 2 with the attack trigger where you essentially it's like you double modify your creatures. Ronald, what is it you like so much about this card?
I think it's just it's a fun, powerful card to play with. It's kind of you don't have to. It's also you can pump your creatures in different ways. You don't have to get a counter on it to get more counters. You can use there are various fight or bite spells that buff your creature before it deals damage to the other creature.
Sure.
I just think it's fun.
I do think it's interesting. I mean, so much of my Selesnya section is devoted to persist stuff, but this is a pretty cool card that would go really well in sort of the +1/+1 counter synergies that I've got in a lot of my stuff. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I feel like you have to read it twice to know what it does, to what you were saying, Ronald, before about how wordy it is.
It's a little hard to grok at first.
Yeah.
It is important to note that unlike Anim, this one does have to attack to get the trigger, which is probably for the best would probably be really ridiculously overpowered if it wasn't that way.
Yeah. I mean, Ward has been such a cool mechanic for these cards that do nothing unless you untap with them. Where for Bonehorde Dracosaur, I was, so down on that card because it's an untap and win card. This is kind of similar, except in some ways worse because you have to untap and then go through a hoop to do the powerful thing. But Ward is just total game changing, right? So I'm not worried about untapping because if I don't untap with this card, it's because they spent their entire turn getting rid of it. They probably had to tap out to do so, which isn't a bad trade. So yeah, Ward has been such a nice little development from design over the last, I can't remember when the first Ward cards came out, but pretty recently.
It's been a few years now.
Strixhaven, I believe.
Oh, wow. Are we on 3 or 4 years of Ward? Am I that old? Oh, no.
And it's nice that it doesn't have to be a mana cost. Sometimes it's discard a card or pay life. So
that part is cool.
Design flexibility there as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that I'm, mired in existential dread over thinking that Ward was just yesterday, we'll end on that note. Ashton, Dan, Ronald, thank you so much for dropping by and doing this. I'm looking forward to the next one. I mean, I think Karlov Manor is going to be so cool, but just in general, chatting about these sets is fun. So thank you, and that's all for now, folks. I'll figure out a sign off for these. Yeah, thank you so much.
May all your top decks be hits.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.